For those of you who don't know, I'm Maggie, and today I wanted to share with you a couple of lessons that I learned in my 20s. So I just put out another video about the best purchases of my 20s, but today I wanted to get a little bit more introspective because I do turn 30 on the 26th. And so I feel like the 20s is just a really big decade. You change so much because you go from being like, an early college student to being a full-on adult that has actual like substantial years of experience under their belt in whatever job they're working in. And it's so weird. I've been saying at work lately, I've been in my job for 7 years. That is wild to think that I've almost been working a decade. And anyway, now I do want to make it clear that I'm not one of those people that gets sad about my birthday. Like, I'm really excited for my 30s. I think it's going to bring a ton of new change and fun experiences, but my 20s did teach me a lot. I thought that I wanted to do like, the 10 things I learned in my 20s or the 5 things. And Brian was like, well, why do you have to only learn in increments of 5? Which is very fair. So I actually have 7 different lessons that I wanted to share with you today. So maybe if you're in your 20s, you're still trying to figure things out. I mean, I don't have everything figured out, but these are just things that I have looked back on and been thankful that I learned. All right, and I'm reading these because I want to phrase these properly, but the first lesson that I learned is that my job doesn't define me or my worth and shouldn't be relied upon for my happiness. And this took a really, really long time for me to figure out. I'm talking like at the end of last year, I finally put all the pieces together. I always think that the first year in a job is the best because you're learning and you're absorbing everything and you're looking through rose-colored glasses because you've never seen it all before and it's new and it's exciting. And the longer you stay at an organization, the more you learn, the more you find out. And oftentimes that leads to you uncovering some flaws in something that you thought was so perfect. And that's everywhere. Like, that is in relationships, that's in families, that's in work as well. And so this past year was a really, really tough year at work for a lot of people. Like, our organization is just going through a lot of change, and the department that I'm in specifically felt that really, really hard. Friends around me were crumbling, and we've had a lot of people leave, and it was just a really tumultuous time. And during that time, I was so stressed out. I ended up going back to the doctor. I have a big history with anxiety, and things were so stressful to the point where I actually got back on my anxiety medicine this year. And despite all of that, despite everything going on at work and the fact that I would cry at the end of some days and some days were just harder than others, I remember distinctly taking a step back while I was walking Nash and looking down and still thinking to myself, even though all this terrible stuff is going on at work, like, I am still happy. Because I think when I was early on in my career, I was definitely defining my successes and my worth with what was going on at work, because that's what took up most of my days. Now that I have side hobbies that I care a lot about, and I'm married and I have a dog and I have responsibilities to other people beyond just myself, I realized that how my family views me and how my husband views me and the love that my dog has for me, like, that is actually where I find my worth and my happiness. And so as soon as I took the pressure off work to provide that to me, work was more enjoyable, and I feel like my relationships were strengthened. So it was just one big good change that I finally had to realize. But if you're early on in your career, understand that there are going to be things that happen to you that are completely outside of your control, and that is no reflection on you. You can be working as hard as possible, you can be doing the best job possible, and sometimes a promotion's just not in the cards. And sometimes you're not going to get a bigger salary because you deserve one, because that's not the way that things are organized. And all of these things have happened to me, which is why I can speak about them with confidence, and that you will encounter bumps in the road. But find your worth in things that matter and that are lasting. Your career is not forever. Another work-related one is admitting your mistakes makes you relatable, nicer to work with, and actually builds camaraderie. So I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I've now been working full-time, had a career for 7 years. And in that time, you encounter a lot of different people. You see different working styles, you see different personalities, you have people from different backgrounds, which is great. Like, working in a very diverse environment is good for growth for so many different reasons. But there have been a handful of people that I've encountered that don't think twice about throwing other team members under a bus. And I hated it. And it was something I could spot from a mile away. And I vowed to myself when I was a first year employee that I would not do that. And I think that it has served me well, because when you admit to mistakes, first of all, you're just straight up telling the truth, which is a good thing. I think we've all kind of understand that. But also it just makes you relatable, because people who work under you and your peers, they're not going to be afraid to come to you and ask for help with things if they mess something up or if they can't figure something out, because they understand that you've been there too and they want to know how you figured it out. So admitting that you made mistakes is a good thing for relationship building and for your job as a whole. And I think overall it builds camaraderie, right? Because if you're not throwing your team members under a bus, you're all in it together. And I think something that comes along with this is then learning to give credit where credit is due. So rather than only pointing out when other people make mistakes, pointing out when they came up with a really good idea or they were the one that really ran with the project and executed most of it, is just being nice. It's building a team, and admitting your mistakes takes a really long time, because at first I remember in my career being so scared to speak up if I messed something up and it was going to have to make us redo something. But you know what? Coming clean as quickly as possible is only going to make things easier for everyone else, and it's going to show that you can recognize mistakes in yourself, own up to them, and then learn and make it better. I promise it will lead to good things and good friendships. All right. Enough with the career talk. The other lessons that I learned in my 20s have a lot to do with personal relationships. And I think I just touched on one at work, because some of my work relationships are some of my best friendships. So the next one that I want to talk about is that added responsibility can oftentimes bring more happiness than obligation. And I had originally written this one specifically about Nash. And I had said, the added responsibility of a pet actually brings more happiness than obligation. And when I was talking through these with my husband Brian, he brought up a really great point that actually that could be said for a lot of things. And so we'll first focus on Nash. And I mentioned in the previous video that I uploaded that I was really scared to get a dog, because I was so afraid that it was going to disrupt my life and my routine, and it would prevent me from doing things that I wanted to do. And don't get me wrong, Nash is a ton of responsibility. You do have to wake up earlier and take him to go to the bathroom and feed him and pay for his vet bills and those basic responsibilities. But for what he gives back to us and adds to our family, makes it all completely worth it. So while things are a little bit harder to do, like we can't just take off and go on a trip whenever we want to, because we've got to make sure that he is okay and taken care of, those things pale in comparison to how much happiness he brings us. I guess the same could be true with like buying a house. With buying a house comes a ton of additional responsibility and expenses in general, but it has also brought us so much happiness and kept us occupied during quarantine, because we got really into house projects and redecorating, and those projects led to additional creativity and other videos that I was able to produce on my YouTube channel. And oftentimes some of the scary aspects that come along with added responsibility will make people shy away from taking that on. But in my experience, taking those risks and then, stepping up to the plate and putting my big girl pants on and taking care of them has actually led to more happiness than like obligation and regret, if that makes sense. The fourth lesson that I learned is all about marriage, and that is that marriage is really fun, but it is really hard, but it is really worth it. And I feel like this is true for so many people, but I just want to voice this and kind of share my side of the story, because I feel like I grew up in Mississippi, so a ton of people that I know get married really young, like finish college, they're engaged at the end of college, they get married the summer after, and they start their whole lives together. But I was a little bit different. Brian and I ended up getting married at age 27 and 28. And so I feel like the new marriage issues that we dealt with were much different than those of my friends who got married super young. Most of the hard part of marriage that I'm referring to is just combining two people's lifestyles. Like, we grew up in two different places in the country. Obviously, our parents were different. And while our core values that we were raised with are very, very similar, there are little things that are taught by your parents that you just do differently, like load the dishwasher or fold your laundry or make a bed or don't make a bed, or just little nitpicky things that they talk to us about in marriage counseling. We opted to do marriage counseling beforehand because we just thought that would be good to learn more about each other. And they warn you of these things and we're like, that's so silly. Why do people fight about that? Who really cares? But when you're in the thick of it, you do care and you do think it's worth arguing about. And let me tell you, those little things are not worth arguing about, but they are worth talking about and being like, hey, that really annoyed me. let's talk through how we're going to change this. So there are really hard days, and there are going to be days when maybe you find out that you do fundamentally disagree on something, but that does not mean that you can't love that person. And so when two people coexist together under the same roof, you're going to encounter hardships. So even though people always just post the highlights and the super fun times that they have together on Instagram, or maybe you watch people on YouTube and they vlog all the time and you just assume that they never fight, they're just not picking up the camera to show you that stuff. So know that marriage is hard. And I feel like it's also super rewarding because I always have somebody that I can turn to when I'm sad, and I always have somebody in the next room that I can go to ask advice. Or if I see something funny, I can always run down the hallway and be like, Brian, look at this thing. And we have the same sense of humor, and he is one of the most supportive, loving, encouraging people. I truly struck gold when I found him. I really, really did. And so while it's super hard to learn these little habits and people's nuances, and even to learn to communicate effectively, it is all worth it for all of the reasons that you saw in them the day that you got married. Now, another thing that annoys me though about people who are married is that they're like, oh my gosh, my wedding day was the best day of my life, blah, 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 blah. For us, things were a little bit different. And while our wedding day was super happy, it was not the day that we planned. And so that day for me came with a lot of joy, but also a lot of equal parts sadness, because we basically had to modify our whole thing because we got married in June of 2020. So our whole wedding party couldn't be there. All of my friends were from out of state. They couldn't travel in. So we did have some good, close local friends there, and we had our immediate family there, which meant the world to us, but it was just different. And so while that day was special, and we are still just as married as everybody else who had their big wedding, for me, I would never say that our wedding day was the happiest day of my life. I have had much more exponentially happier days on days that are arguably much more mundane. And I think that that's one thing that I want you to remember if you're not married, or maybe your wedding didn't go as planned, or maybe you couldn't afford a wedding. It doesn't matter. Like, you are just as married, and the days that follow, I hope, are much happier than the very first day, because if no other day can top that, that's sad. So you do have so much more to look forward to, and even through all the hardships, it is so worth it. The next lesson I learned is actually from my brother. We both, after we graduated college, moved away to different states where we knew no one. He moved to Florida, I ended up moving to Texas, and he's 2 years older than me. So I remember being so nervous and telling him, like, I'm really scared to move away. I don't know anybody. I'm starting this new job. And he was like, Maggie, honestly, the best advice that I have for you, I don't know why I'm getting teary-eyed about this, is to just say yes. And I feel like that advice served me so well, because I was living by myself in an apartment in a new state with a new job where I knew absolutely no one. I took a complete leap when I graduated college, and that advice truly led me to so many wonderful things. And so with that advice in mind, it was really great when I was just meeting people, because if I got invited to do anything, he was like, just say yes. Even if you think you don't want to do it, or it's going to be awkward and weird, go. Because that experience is going to lead to another good experience. You're going to know more people. If anything, you will have just learned where something is, and you've got a better understanding of the geography of the city. Like, there's always a positive spin to saying yes. Once I got through that hump, I feel like the next iteration of this lesson was, I rarely regret saying yes to things I feel like I don't want to do in the moment. So now that we have established ourselves, I found a husband from saying yes and starting this new job. Now it's the little things like, I really don't want to stop what I'm doing or put on these clothes to go to this restaurant. But every time we go and do those things, we don't regret it. There's always something funny that happens, or a good memory that's shared, and just spending time with other people and other friends that you love, like family, is always good. When I'm feeling lazy and I'm feeling like I don't want to get ready and do something, if I just say yes, something good will come from it. I don't want you to take this to the extreme. You still have to have boundaries, and we still say no to some things. But if the reason you're feeling no is only because you're lazy, not because you actually have a responsibility or something to do, or you're not feeling well, then say yes. Another big lesson I learned with this platform in my 20s is that variety sparks creativity. In 2020, 2021, when things were a little bit shut down, we were just supposed to be at home all the time, I got into a really big funk toward the end of it all. Like, I feel like I had a really delayed reaction to all of that, but it was because I like routine. So for a while, it really wasn't a big deal that we were doing the same thing all the time and like stuck at home, because I liked being at home with my family and I like doing the same things. But after a while, it really starts to wear on me. And I feel like I really learned that lesson in 2020 and 2021, where the option for a lot of variety and shaking up your day-to-day and running errands and doing this, that, and the other thing was kind of taken away from us. I had noticed that it was manifesting itself in the weirdest ways. Like, by doing the same thing all the time and never leaving the house and just seeing the same people and just consuming the same types of content or just doing the same types of workouts, I was losing video ideas and creativity, and I didn't have motivation to work out because it was boring because I kept doing the same thing all the time. By exposing yourself to new things and shaking up your routine and doing spontaneous errands or activities, it just brings on so much more creativity. I think this is true for a variety of reasons, because one, exposing yourself to new things gives you new thoughts. It makes you want to research different things. It reminds you of things from your past that may remind you of an idea that you wanted to do for the future, and just the general exposure to new things is wonderful. Bringing variety into your life and pushing yourself out of your comfort zone is gonna come with more reward and more creativity and just give you more of a zest for life, I guess. I've just been really making a conscious effort this year especially, and I think it's helped so much. And the last lesson I learned, I'm really sad that I finally put the pieces together in my 20s, but it makes sense because every middle schooler and every high schooler and even a lot of college students really struggle with this, and that's the idea that you have to conform to something. And the lesson that I've learned over this past decade is that you don't have to like the same things that other people like, or you don't have to dislike something just because somebody else dislikes it. And this can come in so many different forms, and I can point to a million examples. Like, you may love a food that other people think is really gross, and that's okay because you like it. Your taste buds tell you in your brain it's good, so like it. Who cares? They don't have to eat it. Or maybe you like a book that everybody else thought was awful or really boring. That's all right. You liked it, so who cares? And you're not hurting them by reading it. Or maybe you have a favorite TV show that other people make fun of you for liking. It doesn't matter. They don't have to watch it. And I think it's okay to bring something different to the table and to have something that's unique about you, because if there's one big shift I've noticed from being like a middle school girl to like a, I don't know, real adult now, I used to care so much about what other people were wearing. And for us, those things were like Wallabies, these awful shoes that made me sprain my ankle like 50 times and were not very cute in my opinion, but everybody had them, so I had to have them. And now I'm like, oh, I don't want those shoes if every single person has them, because then you're just like clearly trying to follow what they're doing. And I feel like there's a lot of this on social media because so many influencers, they're like, this is what I'm wearing, and now everybody and their mother has the exact same shoes. And while I do buy things like that sometimes because I genuinely like it, I don't want to force myself to like a trend just because it's a trend. That's why I'm still wearing skinny jeans while all these really weird cuts of jeans are in. And that's okay. I don't like those jeans. I don't think they're flattering on me, so I'm not going to wear jeans that aren't flattering. But if somebody else likes the way that they look in those jeans, whatever, wear the jeans. I'm just not going to do it. And I think having the power for that to be okay and to say, yeah, I'm just not going to do that thing, is one that I really had to like grow to have. I'm just here to tell you, if you're a middle schooler, it's okay to be different, and it is okay to not like the same things as everybody else, okay? Okay. Those were all the lessons that I learned, and I really hope that I got my point across, because as I'm sitting here at the end, when I've been filming for like 45 minutes, I'm like, man, I really hope that I said everything that I set out to say. So this has been really fun. This video and the last video about my favorite purchases, I like looking back and reflecting and looking at ways that I've grown and new great things that have been added to our lives. And I hope that this resonated with you and that you were able to connect with me in some way on this, regardless of what age you are. And maybe you have different lessons that you learned that I didn't touch on here. Leave them in the comments. If you have any advice to share about just like, I don't know, wading your way through life, let us hear it. So I'm really excited for what the 30s are gonna bring. I hope that you'll stick around and subscribe and join the community, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.